know. Ha! Okay. This one is totally going to be an experiment. This is the first time that I've gone live on my phone. So we are going to see how this is going to work. I'm hoping that the internet stays working well enough that it doesn't kick me off. I just printed all of my questions. I did want to start with thank you for joining. Happy that you're here. I haven't done this in like 3 weeks, even though I said this was going to be like a weekly live Q&A, and I totally meant to do that, but I'm really sorry that I've not done it in the last 3 weeks. The thing is that the holiday crush for me was incredibly real this year. So my last 3 weeks have been absolutely insane in terms of trying to get orders fulfilled and orders sent out before the USPS shipping deadlines, and just trying to make everybody's Christmas and gifting season and everything go smoothly. So sorry for not having done this in like 3 weeks. But, so I do have a little bit of a backlog of questions. As always, if you guys watching have questions live, feel free to drop them in there, and I will get to them if I have time. Otherwise, if you are watching this not on a live stream and you're watching it later, and you have a question about something either that I say during this live, or you have a question about something completely unrelated to the live, you can drop it in this comment section. You can drop it in any of my video comment sections, and I will get to it as soon as possible. So, first question, I have 9 questions. 2 of them are quite long. The rest of them either are going to be quite short, or we'll see how it goes. I'm going to be pausing to drink some peppermint tea every so often with my mug that says Great Ideas Brewing. Ouch, as I like burn my hand. Anyway, so number 1, how many males and how many females do you need for breeding? Theoretically, 1 of each will get the job done. I would probably need more information on this question of like what your goals are. If you are looking at starting like a longer term colony, I wouldn't start with anything less than like 3,000 crickets. You could probably get a pretty healthy population going in a few rounds with just 50 to 100 crickets. But what I would say with that is your inbreeding issues might become so great that you will need to introduce more crickets at a later date. The more often you are bringing in outside insects, outside crickets, the larger your potential disease risks from bringing in those outside insects are. Not sure proper way to say that for that one. But so that's just something to think about. You can definitely start with smaller numbers, but again, you're going to need to introduce some new genetics every so often, and how often you need to do that really is dictated by how many you start with. The smaller amount that you start with, the more often and earlier you're going to have to introduce new genetics, which, like I said, increases your risk of disease introduction, things like that. Pretty easy question though for the first one. Alright, so question number 2. Thank you for all the useful videos. I would like to now ask you about a quite weird issue. I did tons of research on it but couldn't find the answer. I've been raising crickets with success for a few months. Besides some beginners issues at the beginning, for now the colonies are established and thriving. But recently I got a secondhand plastic reptile tank, and I thought it would be great for a bunch of baby crickets. I obviously properly cleaned the tank, bleach solution, then rinsed it and dried it for several days. Within a few hours, almost the whole bunch were dead. Even those who were still alive showed signs of paralysis. I've tried to consider all the factors that could play a role, but since all of them are on the same food like the others and were absolutely healthy and vigorous before, all I could think about is that there was some issue with the tank. I have a similar tank I use for another bunch of juveniles. They are all doing well. That tank was used for white tree frogs, but the This tank was used most probably for a snake. Before, I can't track it because the tank came through SPCA. Do you think it's reasonable to conclude that maybe the venom or the urine of the snake could have somehow be absorbed by the plastic and now it evaporates and that killed the crickets? I haven't found any similar issue online, but thought to ask around a few experts and also to share the experience so that others know that this can be an issue. So this was one of my long questions. First things first, I would not reuse or use a second-hand plastic tub in particular. Plastic definitely can absorb a whole bunch of different things, and there's really not a good way to get it out. So I know nothing about, I would hope that it didn't have a venomous snake. Do people keep venomous snakes? Like, ooh, I don't like snakes. I've gotten over my fear slightly, but it's not my favorite thing. I don't know on the snake venom, and I also don't really know on the snake urine. I don't know if that would be problematic to the crickets. What I do know is problematic is bleach. There's a lot of things in the human world that we rinse with bleach. There's a lot of produce and things like that. Like that's part of the food safety is it goes through a bleach solution, like a diluted bleach solution that is going to kill off bacteria, but ends up not causing you issues when you eat it. Most people don't know that, but now you do. So there's a lot of veggies and things like that that are rinsed in a bleach solution. And at those concentration levels, that doesn't cause us problems as humans. However, you have to remember that the insects that you are dealing with have much higher sensitivities to levels of chemicals. So that's one thing. Do not clean your cricket things with chemicals. Just don't do it. Especially not plastic. Like plastic, you can't get that out. No matter what you do, the plastic is going to absorb some of it. This is my big thing with sponges as well. Like, do not clean those with bleach. Do not clean those with bleach. But in general, like, don't clean your Cricut stuff with chemicals. You cannot get the residue levels low enough that you're not going to negatively impact your entire population. So more so of whatever was in that before you put the crickets in it, I would worry more about the cleaning process is probably what caused your crickets the issue. And then, so another note on like the levels that are safe for us versus the levels that would be safe for the crickets. The smaller the crickets are, so you said you put pinheads in here, you said you put baby crickets in it, those baby crickets are going to be even more sensitive than the adult crickets would be. They can tolerate even less. So I would throw that one out and start over. It's just secondhand when you don't know what's been in it, you don't know how things have been treated. I just do not recommend secondhand equipment for raising the crickets unless you know the history of it and you know that it is, it's fine, it's kosher. So, it's fine, lesson learned. Thank you for the question though. So I'm wondering how crickets stay warm in their natural habitat. And this was based off of a video that I did about raising crickets in the winter, because there are certain challenges that come up with raising crickets in the winter, particularly in northern climates like Iowa. So crickets don't stay warm in their natural habitat. Insects are cold-blooded creatures. They do not generate internal heat. That's part of the reason that they are so efficient in producing protein is they don't have to generate body heat. All they have to do is eat to grow, not eat to stay warm. So they stay warm in their natural habitat based off of the external heat sources. So crickets here in the wild in Iowa are only active when all the other insects are active, and that's only when it's warm. Otherwise, everybody knows when the first like really hard freeze happened, because all of the bugs are gone. So the native crickets, I'm assuming, and I don't really have any way of verifying this, but I'm assuming that native crickets here in Iowa are laying their eggs. Those are overwintering and being frozen, and then they hatch in the spring when it's warm enough for them to get after it. So that's my guess. I just saw you can ask questions here, Gregory. I just saw a question pop up before then asking, let me see if I can see them. Live chat, all are visible. Okay, what is the ideal food for feeding to crickets? So depending on where you are, let me see if I can minimize that. Sorry, bear with me. This is my first live on my phone versus on a computer. Ideal feed for crickets. We feed ours a non-GMO insect diet that comes from Bioforge Labs out of Huxley, Iowa. You can purchase it on eBay. I think they sell a 4-pound bag on eBay. 4 pounds, depending on your size, will get you pretty far if you're just keeping crickets just for like a pet or something like that on a relatively small scale. 4 pounds will last you a pretty good while. If you are looking at scaling up and doing a larger cricket farm, they have larger sizes, 50-pound bags, things like that. So Bioforge Labs. If you don't have access to that, a non-medicated chick starter or non-medicated chicken feed works really well. I would target somewhere between 20 and 30% protein. If it does not end up having any sort of animal protein in it, you are going to want to supplement with some sort of animal protein to help reduce cannibalism, because crickets are opportunistic omnivores, and if they do not get the nutrients they require, their brother and sister to the left and the right start looking really delicious. So that is my recommendation for that. I just saw another question pop up, and do crickets have fiber? Yes, they do. They are, the chitin in the exoskeleton actually is technically all fiber. You can't digest it. So it is one of the only natural sources of protein, of animal protein, that has fiber in it as well. So yes, they are a source of fiber. What does cricket powder smell like? Cricket powder smells kind of like, well, when crickets are drying, when they are cooking, they smell sort of like McDonald's French fries. I know that sounds really weird, but that is what it is. So it's kind of what the cricket powder smells like. It has a very light. Do we ship internationally? I don't ship internationally yet. Working on it. It is just one of those things that there are a lot of things that go with shipping internationally that I have not had time to figure out yet. Sorry, back to what does cricket powder smell like? It has kind of a light, nutty, earthy smell. But again, like when crickets are roasting, they smell like McDonald's French fries. So there's that. Do you use some specific illumination for crickets or specific lighting for crickets? Nope. We just have standard run-of-the-mill LED lighting in our cricket barn. We don't have any set sort of photo period or anything like that, so we are not externally controlling how much light the crickets are getting at a time. I've not had any issues by not controlling the photo period. I don't necessarily know that it needs manipulating. There is a window at the front that is a source of natural light, so there is at least some natural light at all times. So I can't necessarily tell you that you aren't going to have any issues if you have no light, but it's just not something that has necessarily come up. Question number 6. So whoever asked about the feed, you were just slightly early on that. Would you mind sharing what you feed your crickets other than the potatoes? I've been buying cricket feed in a jar at PetSmart, but it's kind of expensive. So same thing that I said before, I highly recommend Bioforge Labs has an insect diet. You can get 4 pounds. I want to say it's like 4 pounds for $25 or something like that, which if you are getting it at PetSmart, it's probably one of those tiny little jars that I don't even know if it would be 8 ounces in there, half a pound. It would be quite expensive. So I would think that if you can hop on eBay and find the listing for Bioforge Labs for their insect diet, that is 100% the way I recommend going. I've never had any issues. They are a disease-free plant as well, so it's a biosecure facility. So you don't have any, because that is one thing. So keeping outside insects out is one way to reduce your disease risk, obviously, for bringing in new crickets. But you also have to be conscious of where your feed is coming from, because there are feed mills in the past that have tested positive for the cricket paralysis virus, which is carried by dust. So it goes really well in feed, and that will infect your entire colony and you will be wiped out. So Bioforge Labs in Huxley, Iowa, 100% is who I recommend for the feed. Otherwise, if you don't have that, you can do like a dry dog or cat food or like a dry fish flake. Just grind it up so it's easily accessible by your crickets, and that should work as well. But like I said, make sure that you have some sort of animal protein in your feed. Otherwise, you will start to have a cannibalism problem. Okay, how many crickets should survive in a good way as a percentage of pinheads to adults? So basically like mortality rates and things like that. When I started out, my mortality rates were probably 80 to 90%. I was terrible at raising crickets, like really, really bad. I would hatch a ton of pinheads, could not keep them alive. At the time, had no idea that humidity was such key for pinheads, didn't realize that their exoskeleton was not completely developed and made them very prone to drying out, did not have a good like ground up feed source for them, didn't have any supplemental feed and water sources in the form of potatoes. I was really, really bad. If you can get your mortality rates below 50%, I would say like a really good target to shoot for is like 30%. If you can get your mortality rates to 30%, you are doing really, really well. I've heard rumors of people that like get it under 10%, but I don't know if I believe them. It's really hard to say. Unless you are in there counting all of them, it's really, really hard to know. Just my personal opinion. So if you can get it around, 30 to 40%, I think you're doing quite well. Something to shoot for anyways. So next one is a pretty long one too. So number 8. I do wonder if it's worth all the work of separating, measuring, and putting them back together. And this is in reference to separating out pinheads from incubators and things like that. So getting them off to the start. What metric do you have to estimate survival rates? This came up again. I think there's always some death and cannibalism that are very hard to measure. Totally agree with that. I prefer to not do all the work and ditch the incubator bin completely by placing the soil and I will get to you on that demisted question. I got some thoughts, so bear with me. Let me finish this question and I'll come back to that one. I prefer to not do all the work and ditch the incubator bin completely by placing the soil trays into definitive bins and letting them just hatch into a readily furnished bin. Your method has the advantage of a better age and size uniformity. I only leave soil trays in the adults laying for 1 day, and hatching times still vary by up to 5 days or so. At smaller scale, eggs aren't really a limiting factor, but if you keep a good sized reproductive adult population to keep them laying, I just ballpark that and let them start a little overpopulated. Maybe they stabilize themselves. It's a cricket eat cricket world. I like that. Assume at your scale it starts making sense to cut on the losses and keep things uniform. Just thoughts. There's a lot in that. So the reason that I separate them all out, I separate the pinheads, I measure the pinheads, I put them in separate bins, is because the scale that we're at, efficiency is the key. So trying to be as efficient as possible. The only way to be efficient and the only way to know if we are doing well in terms of mortality rates, waste, all of those things, is to measure it. So if I were to just put the whole breeding tray in, 100% you'd end up way overpopulated. I used to do that at the beginning. Do not do it. You'd end up way overpopulated. You would end up not having any idea what your feed efficiency is like. You wouldn't have any idea where you start to have problems. They're just, There's a lot of variables and a lot of things that make it difficult to grow and scale. If you are doing this like on a tiny scale, that's fine. It may not be worth the extra work to you, but if you are looking at scaling up at all, you're going to need to figure out a good method of separating them out so that you know if you're getting more efficient. Personal opinion. Lots of thoughts in that one, and I like the Cricut world. Let me see if I can get that. Trying to figure out how I show my chat things. Top chat. Do you utilize demisted beetles to keep the colony cleaned up? I love watching mine jet around. Okay. So, I would rather burn my Cricut barn down than have demisted beetles in it. I hate them. I don't think that they are actually very good cleaner bugs. I think they just proliferate and cause problems. And for me, as I am putting my Crickets in food, I don't need extra bugs in my bugs. It's not what I want. I like I said, I hate demisted beetles. Yeah, sorry. I hate them. They come in with outside anytime if I'm trying to beef up my population or just add a little bit of genetic variability. They come in with all of the big Cricut farms. They all have demisted beetles. I think they're said to be cleaner bugs, but I think more of it, what it is they ended up with an infestation and they needed to, shall we say, they needed to spin it and spin it positively as to why they have these freaking beetles in with their Crickets. I think it's inevitable that when you are raising any sort of insect, you are promoting a particular environment that is conducive to insects doing well. Naturally, you are going to attract other insects, so it makes sense. But, yeah, no, I hate demisted beetles. Do not recommend them as a cleaner. No. Sorry. I know if you love them, I'm sorry, but I kill them on sight when I see them. I've had an infestation before and it took me forever to get rid of them. I don't like them. But I'm glad you like them, so you embrace them. If I find them, I'll send them to you. How's that sound? Okay, last question that I have on here. Do I need anything in the bottom of my bins for my pinheads? So, no is my short answer. I see a lot of, I don't want to say it's necessarily always reptile keeping sites, but it is generally reptile keeping sites that recommend you putting vermiculite on the bottom of your bins. The only time that I think you should potentially do something like this is if you are using a glass terrarium. That is going to be difficult for your Crickets to get around on. Glass and Crickets, especially like clean glass, does not mix super great. So that's maybe the only time that you're going to need something in the bottom. But in general, otherwise, I don't think that you need anything on the bottom. So we actually do, when we set up our grow bins, well, and so I should caveat that. So in our incubator bins, you can go, I have this like 30-minute extended thing on incubators. In those, we actually do like double layer the bottom with things. So the very bottom of the incubator, I put 2 squares of paper towel, kitchen roll, wherever you are in the world, whatever you call it. Paper towels, I put them in the bottom, and that helps twofold. So that is partly helps guard against condensation and additional moisture because you are in a humid atmosphere within those incubators. You need that to keep the breeding substrate moist so that everything hatches. So that's necessary, but condensation will kill your pinheads as they hatch. So we put that on the bottom, and then we have a layer of egg flats on top of that before we start stacking in the breeding trays. So there's 2 layers in there, technically. Plenty of surface area. That's the other thing that the kitchen towels on the bottom do, is they increase the surface area so that when we start to get mega hatches, I call them, and you start to carpet, in other words, the pinheads hatch faster than you can get them out into the bins. additional surface area can save lives in that case. So twofold on that one. And then in our actual grow out bins, when we set the pin heads up, and I probably need to redo a whole bunch of these videos because they're fairly old and things have changed slightly, but not a ton. So setting up the bins, the very first thing we do before we put I do it after we put the egg flats in now, because I put the egg flats in and just let them sit. But we always dump a very thin layer of feed on the bottom. So again, that is not necessarily so that the crickets can easily get around. That is more so that they have access to food super easy without me having to worry about them finding the 2 feed plates on both ends of the bin. Pinheads will die for no reason. So you want to give them as few reasons to die as possible. So making food as accessible as possible is one of those ways that you can hopefully reduce those mortality rates. It's not completely foolproof, but that's kind of what I thought is. Okay, I saw one more. Okay, I keep my crickets in a naturalistic big tub that's half dirt, substrate, and sand. I'm only growing mine for my lizard, so it's not large scale, but by any means, I need to figure out how to do this on phone. Sorry, guys. But have a separate tub to move the extra dermistids to once they start overpopulating. Okay, so you admit it. They do start to overpopulate. They become a problem. No, they get in everything. I am not a fan of dermistids. I'm glad you like them. I'm glad that you have a separate little habitat for them. But man, they just, ugh. Can you add, yes, so can you add a link to the Cricut Food You Recommend after this live? Yes, I totally will do that. If not, I'll text the owners and see if they have it handy so that I can just drop it in the comments on this or drop it in the description. I'll probably drop it in the description, to be honest. I know somebody on a previous live actually told me that they called them and they called the owners and they said it's available on eBay, because I did not know that they had it available on eBay. I think it's really cool that they do. So I will see if I can track that down from Bioforge Labs, because one thing, feed quality does make all the difference. The higher quality feed definitely translates into better crickets. I mean, I know that seems totally obvious, and it probably is obvious, but I've just gone back and forth messing with it too many times and have just come to the obvious conclusion that higher quality feed ends up with a better population of crickets. So, okay, that is all I have for this week. I will not be back next week because it is the day after Christmas and I will likely be traveling on that day. But the following, like New Year's-ish, I will probably do another one of these. If you are watching this later and you have a question, please drop in the comments below, or anytime, as always, if you're watching any of the other videos on my channels, on my one channel, can't even manage one, on my channel, if you have any questions about any of the methodology of things we do, please drop that question in the comments, unless it is about dermisted beetles, and then I'll tell you just burn your whole thing down. Totally kidding, but kind of not. As always, here to help, and thanks so much for watching, and I will be back probably in 2 weeks. I like doing these on Sundays, and like I said, next week is totally out because it's the day after Christmas and I know I'll be traveling. So, thanks for being here. I hope you have a great Christmas week. Enjoy. Thanks for watching, guys. Oh, how do I exit out of this now, man?